I started working at Belgrave Regional Hospital in early spring, after transferring from a much larger trauma center in the city. I thought the slower pace and smaller staff might help with my anxiety had gotten worse over the last few years, and I was trying to rebuild my confidence on the job. I didn't expect much from the place, just a paycheck and maybe some peace. Belgrave wasn't what you'd call modern. It had that sterile beige, institutional look that never quite faded, no matter how clean the walls were. Parts of it were downright ancient wings that hadn't been renovated since the 1960s. Long halls with flickering fluorescent lights and chipped vinyl floors. Still, the people were kind. The management left me alone, and the patients were mostly quiet. For the first week or two, it almost felt peaceful. I was assigned to the night shift on East Wing 6, a small long-term care and observation unit. Only 9 rooms, usually 3 or 4 patients max. Nothing high pressure. The nurse I replaced, a woman named Marlene, had apparently quit suddenly. No one seemed to know why. That alone didn't raise any red flags. Worked in hospitals long enough to know nurses often leave without a word. Burnout, politics, trauma. It's just how it is. But by my second week, I started noticing things. Little things at first. There was room 608 always cold. Colder than the others, even though the entire wing shared the same HVAC system. I'd walk in for a vitals check, and the air would feel like a freezer. My skin would break out in goosebumps instantly, even through my scrubs. The first few nights, I assumed it was just a draft or bad insulation. I put in a work order, but maintenance never followed up. The patients assigned to 608 rarely lasted more than a night or two. One night, it would be an elderly woman with short-term observation, and by the next morning, she'd be urgently transferred to ICU for sudden complications. Or a man with chest pain would check in for overnight monitoring, then start screaming during the night, incoherent and terrified, begging to be moved. No one ever stayed in room 608 longer than 2 nights. Ever. I started asking the other nurses about it. Quietly, carefully nurses talk, but gossip can turn on you fast. Most gave vague answers. Yeah, that room's weird. One of the techs said, I try not to go in there if I don't have to. A night nurse named Caleb just shook his head and muttered, that room's bad luck. One night, around 3 a.m., I was doing charting at the nurses' station when I heard something from 608. It wasn't a call bell. It was a scream, short, sharp, and guttural. I jumped up so fast, I knocked over my water bottle. Sprinting down the dim hallway, heart pounding, I threw the door open. The room was empty. No patient, no sound. The bed was neatly made. The monitor was off. The room had been vacant that night. I stood there for a long minute, eyes adjusting to the dark, the air unnaturally cold around me. I checked under the bed, in the bathroom, even behind the door. Nothing. No sign of anyone. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself I must have misheard something. Maybe a distant yell from the ER below, echoing through the vents. But I didn't. Believe it, that scream hadn't been distant. It was close. Inside the room, a few nights later, Caleb asked if I'd ever had the screaming dream. I didn't know what he meant. He leaned in, his voice low. Happens to every new night nurse. Eventually, he said, you go home, you crash after your shift, and in your dream, you're walking into 608. Only the bed's full, and someone's lying there with a sheet pulled over their face. You try to leave, but you can't move. You're stuck. Then the body starts shaking under the sheet, and when you reach to pull it back, he stopped there, gave me a haunted look, and walked off. I laughed it off that night. I told myself he was just messing with a new hire, until I had the dream, the exact way he described it. Down to the shaking, the paralysis, the voice under the sheet. Except in my dream. It spoke, it didn't scream. Spoke, clearly, in a gravelly, desperate whisper. I never left. They think I left, but I never left. I'm still here. I woke up, drenched in sweat, gasping, my hands curled so tightly around my blanket I'd left nail marks in my palms. I didn't sleep the next night. Things kept getting worse. Medical equipment in 608 would go haywire for no reason. Vitals monitors would spike even when the bed was empty. Lights would flicker violently any time I stepped inside. And sometimes, just sometimes, I'd walk by and see the reflection of a person sitting upright in the bed, visible in the hallway window. But when I stepped inside, the room would be empty again. The worst was the second scream. It happened during a code blue in room 605. A patient had gone into cardiac arrest, and the whole team swarmed in. I was pushing meds while the charge nurse did compressions. As I reached for the epinephrine, I heard it again, this horrible, blood-freezing scream. But not from 605, from down the hall room. 608. I turned instinctively. And saw the door wide open. There was a figure standing in the doorway, pale, thin, wearing scrubs. Like mine, but the skin was wrong, grayish, stretched. The face was all wrong, too. Mouth open to wide, eyes like pits. Just standing there, watching. I blinked, and it was gone. After that, I went to HR. I told them I needed to be reassigned. I couldn't work East Wing 6 anymore. The HR woman, a tired-looking lady named Stephanie, didn't look surprised. She pulled out a file and handed it to me. Inside were resignation letters, 4 of them, all from previous night nurses assigned to East Wing 6. Every single one mentioned room 608.1, wrote, "I can't sleep anymore without hearing the screaming." Another, "Something is wrong with that room. I think it knows we're watching." Stephanie closed the folder and looked at me. "You're the 5th night nurse we've had in 6 months," she said quietly. "You lasted the longest. I left that day. No notice. I just walked out after my shift and never went back." A few months later, I got a message on Facebook from a nurse I didn't know. Her name was Gina, and she'd just been hired at Belgrave. She asked, "Hey, did you work the night shift on East Wing 6? I found your name on some old paperwork." I replied, "Yes," but hesitated. I didn't know what to say. She responded again, "Have you ever had the dream?" And that's when I knew it was starting all over again. I got my nursing license late in life after 2 decades working in admin roles that drained me. I thought healthcare would give me purpose. I was wrong. My first hospital job as an RN was at Greystone Medical, a mid-sized hospital tucked into a forgotten corner of the city. It had a reputation for being understaffed and underfunded, but they offered night shifts, and I needed the paycheck. I was assigned to the burn trauma recovery unit, which was exactly as grim as it sounds. Most of the patients were silent, sedated, or simply too broken to speak. The nights were long and quiet, full of sterile silence and the steady beeping of monitors. There was only one other nurse on duty overnight, Angela, a short, silver-haired woman who'd been working there too long, as she put it. She was pleasant but distant, kind in a tired, automatic way. She trained me for my first week and told me to keep to my rounds. Stay out of mirror room 4 and never ever answer if someone calls your name from an empty room. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. Room 4 wasn't actually its name. The chart labeled it 414, but everyone called it the mirror room. The walls were standard off-white tile. The lights just as flickery as every other room. But what made it strange and settling, even, was the mirror. Hospitals don't normally have mirrors in patient rooms. Site concerns, safety hazards, maintenance issues, they're usually avoided. But 414 had one built directly into the far wall, nearly floor-to-ceiling, fixed inside the structure like it had been part of the original design. It was old, too. The silver behind the glass was decaying, black splotches around the edges, like rot. You could barely see your reflection clearly in some areas. It distorted things slightly enough to make it feel like someone was always watching. I asked Angela about it once. She just said they tried to remove it in the 90s. 2 workers got injured doing it. Then one fell down the elevator shaft. The next day, they stopped trying. I laughed, but she didn't. Room 414 was almost always empty. Patients who were placed in their requested transfers by the second day. Some pulled out their IVs and refused care until they were moved. A few had full-on psychotic breaks, screaming that someone was watching them from inside the mirror. It was night 4 of my second week. When I had my first real experience, I was doing hourly vitals checks, and when I got to room 414, it was empty, cleaned, lights off, untouched. But as I passed, I heard it, a soft knock, not from the hallway. From inside the room, I paused, heart hitching in my chest. The knock came again, soft, deliberate. 3 gentle taps against glass. I opened the door slowly. The room was pitch black, except for the green glow of a wall monitor left on standby. And in the mirror, I swear to God I saw someone standing behind me. A woman. But when I spun around, no one was there. I stepped backward, breathing hard. The reflection was wrong. Off by a second, like a lag in a video call. I lifted my hand, and my reflection stayed still for half a second before copying me. I shut the door and left, refusing to look at the mirror again. I didn't tell Angela. I didn't want her to think I was losing it. But over the next few nights, it kept happening. Sometimes when I passed the room, I'd see a light on when no one had entered, or I'd hear faint breathing. Once I could have sworn I saw movement in the mirror, flicker of dark hair, the edge of a hospital gown, and then it started calling my name. At first, it was barely a whisper, just a quiet, breathy Mia as I passed the door. Always soft, always coming from inside the empty room. Then it got bolder. One night, I was walking the south corridor when I heard it again, Mia. But this time, it came from behind. Me? I turned. Nothing. Just the hallway. But when I turned back, room 414's door was open. No one had touched it. I hadn't heard the latch. I stood frozen, my feet refusing to move. Something inside me whispered, "Don't go in." That's what I told myself. I stepped inside. The light flicked on by itself, and there she was. Not in the bed, not in the room, in the mirror. A woman tall, rail-thin, wearing an old hospital gown, scorched around the sleeves. Her skin was mottled with burns, twisted and blackened down one side of her face. But the eyes, that's what I remember most. They were too wide, too bright, She was smiling, but it wasn't right. It was too calm. I blinked and she was gone. I ran out of the room and didn't go back. Angela didn't ask what happened. She just looked at me and said, "You should call out tomorrow. Take a night off. If you go in again, she might not let you leave." That night at home, I couldn't sleep. Every mirror in my apartment was covered. I kept hearing taps. 3. Slow, deliberate knocks on the window, the closet, even my bedroom wall. When I finally dozed off, I dreamed I was inside room 414, but the mirror was gone instead. I was on the other side of it, looking out, watching myself pass by in the hallway, and in the dream, my reflection smiled. That same burned, wide-eyed woman, smiling with my mouth. I quit the next day. No notice. I didn't go back to get my badge or clear out my locker. I left Greystone behind and tried to forget, but sometimes, even now, I catch movement in the corner of my eye when I walk past mirrors, and when I get too close, the glass fogs up as if someone on the other side is breathing, waiting, watching. I got assigned to Hollow Pines Infirmary after I moved to a small mountain town to escape the chaos of my life. My father had died. My relationship had collapsed, and the city had grown too loud. I wanted quiet, peace, the kind of quiet only rural hospitals provide. Hollow Pines was old. It used to be a tuberculosis sanitarium in the 1920s. Over the years, it had been converted into a general care facility, then partially closed due to budget cuts. Now, only certain wings remained open. The rest of it, the east wings, the surgery theater, and most notably, the third floor, were permanently closed. At least, that's what I was told. I worked nights, as always. Fewer people, less chaos. Just me, a security guard named Ron, and a floating medtech. The air always smelled faintly of bleach and metal. My unit was on the second floor, overlooking the forest through narrow windows barred with rusting steel. One night, about 3 weeks into the job, I got called by a patient's daughter in the middle of the shift. Her mother was confused. She said, disoriented. She insisted that someone had come into her room claiming to be a nurse, but there had been no nurse on that side of the wing for over an hour. I walked down to investigate. The mother, an elderly woman recovering from surgery, clutched my arm with ice-cold fingers and whispered. She said she was from upstairs, from the third floor, but her eyes weren't right. I told her kindly there was no third floor anymore. She shook her head. "No," she said. She said I looked like her daughter. She said she used to work here. The next day, I asked Ron about it during our overlap. He just frowned "You heard about the elevator?" he asked. I shook my head. He motioned for me to follow and took me to the west end of the building. There, partially concealed behind a fire door, was an old freight elevator, the kind with a collapsing steel gate and rusted buttons. Only 2 floors were labeled, 1 and 2. But if you looked closely, there was a worn-down space above the 2, no number, where a button had clearly once been. They welded it shut in the late 90s, Ron said. 3rd floor's been sealed ever since. Why? I asked. He looked away. There was a fire, killed a nurse and 3 patients. They said it started from faulty wiring, but he trailed off. But floor doesn't stay quiet. You'll hear footsteps sometimes, or bells, call lights blinking, even though the floor is supposed to have no power. I chalked it up to local lore. Every hospital has ghosts, after all, but that same night, I was doing charting near 2 a.m. when I noticed something on the console. The call board had lit up room 320. I stared at it. There was no room 320. The 2nd floor only went up to room 218. There was no active 3rd floor, but the light blinked steadily. Then it disappeared. I told myself it was a glitch until the next night. This time, it wasn't a light. It was a voice. I was walking past the break room when I heard it through the intercom system, faint and crackling. Room 320. Someone, help. I stood there, frozen. The intercom wasn't supposed to be active during nights, and the speaker it came from was one of the older ones, Dad to the original building wiring. I radioed Ron, who insisted no one else had entered the building. He checked the cameras. No one had used the freight elevator in years. Still, I couldn't shake it. The next night, I brought a flashlight and went back to that same elevator. The buttons didn't respond, but the steel door had a tiny seam along the side, just wide enough that I could hear the wind whistling up the shaft. And something else, a sound I couldn't explain. It was the sound of someone breathing, ragged and close. Then the sound of a call light ping. I stepped back and went straight to the nurse's station. My hands were shaking. The next morning, before my shift ended, I checked the archived floor plan of the building kept in a dusty binder in admin storage. There it was, the original layout. 3rd floor, isolation and psychiatric recovery. Room 320 was real once, but someone had blacked out the entire wing with marker, and below it, written in faint pencil, were the words, "Shut down after incident. Do not assign. Presence reported." Presence. That night, the call light for room 320 came on again, but this time I answered it. I shouldn't have. I used the stairwell. The door to the third floor had no lock, just a rusted-out nitrogen monoxide and a warped wooden push bar. It opened easily. The air was thick with dust. Old gurneys lined the hallway, and the lights flickered faintly, like they still had some juice in them. I walked slowly, my flashlight beam jittering over peeling wallpaper and mold-stained walls. I passed a room labeled 317, then 318. Then I found it. Room 320. The door was closed, but there was a light on inside, and I heard movement. I opened it. Inside was a hospital bed, neatly made. A vitals monitor, dead but plugged in. And standing at the far end of the room, facing the wall, was a woman in pale blue scrubs. Her back was to me. Her hair was dark and stringy, falling over her shoulders like wet threads. "Nurse," I said, instinctively. She turned slowly. Her face wasn't burned. It wasn't bleeding. It was just gone. Smooth skin stretched where her features should have been. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, just blank flesh, and yet knew she was looking at me. She lifted her hand, slowly, deliberately, and pointed at me. I ran. I don't remember the stairs or how I got back to the main floor. I just remember the sound of running footsteps behind me, louder than mine. Faster, growing closer, until the stairwell door slammed shut behind me. I never opened that elevator again. I told Ron everything. He just nodded and said, "You made it out. That's more than the last one. The last one." He looked down at his coffee. 3 months before you came, another night nurse tried to explore that floor. She didn't come back. I asked what happened to her. They said she left town, he said. But I checked the footage. He hesitated. She walked into the elevator, never came out. That was a year ago. I transferred out of state shortly after. But sometimes, when I work late, I check the call board out of habit, and every so often, I see it light up, room 320, still calling, still waiting. My name's Lena, and I used to work night shift in the old wing of Ridgeway Memorial, a sleepy little hospital tucked between empty fields and wooded backroads. It was the kind of place where nothing happened until everything did. I'd been there 3 months when they started a small renovation project, opening up a long-sealed records room that had been closed off since the 80s. The admin team said it had been damaged in a basement. Flood years ago and hadn't been touched since. But a group of interns and one of the doctors decided to finally go through the old files, digitize what they could, and trash the rest. That was the week things changed. A few days after they opened the room, I came in for my usual shift. I passed the hallway bulletin board on the way to clock in a yellowed corkboard. Cluttered with notices and faded flyers, saw something new pinned near the corner. It was an old photograph, black and white, glossy with curled edges. It showed a group of nurses, 5 of them, posed stiffly in front of the original Ridgeway entrance. Judging by the uniforms, it was from the 1950s. They wore white dresses and caps, smiling tightly, their hands folded in front of them. But the woman in the center, her smile was wide, too wide. Her eyes seemed just slightly off-center, unfocused, as if she were looking at someone just outside the frame. Her face was sharp, angular, and strangely familiar, though I couldn't place how or why. I asked around about the photo. No one else had noticed it. The next night, it was gone. I assumed someone from admin had taken it down, maybe to archive it. But then I saw it again, this time pinned to the break room corkboard, slightly askew. Same nurses, same strange expression on the woman's face. This time, someone had scribbled a note on the back in fading ink. It said, "Do not remove. She returns when forgotten." I took a photo of it with my phone, but the next morning, it wasn't there. Neither was the copy on my phone. The image was gone, deleted from my gallery. Not even in the recently deleted folder. I didn't talk to anyone about it again, but that face, it started showing up everywhere once, while assisting a post-op patient. I noticed a black and white badge phototaped inside their chart binder, old ID. Left over from the 60s maybe. Same woman, same blank eyes, and wide, unnatural grin. Later that week, I was reviewing a chart in the nurse's station when I looked up and saw a familiar face on the staff wall. A board displaying employee photos and department names. I froze. She was there. A photo in color this time. Her hair longer. Different uniform, but the same face. She was labeled Karen D. Night Nurse. I asked HR about her. They looked confused. "There's no one by that name on payroll," they said. "We haven't hired anyone new in weeks." But that night, Karen D. was on. The shift schedule, printed in all caps. Same as mine. I checked with the charge nurse. She said she hadn't seen her yet, but maybe Karen was floating from another floor. I didn't sleep that day. The next shift, I caught a glimpse of her. In the hallway mirror, near ICU. Not in front of me, the reflection. A nurse in white, standing at the end of the corridor, watching me. Her head tilted, unmoving. I turned. No one there. I asked the overnight security guard if he'd seen anyone matching her description. He nodded slowly and said, "Yeah, a woman. In old-style whites. Shows up on camera sometimes. Always facing the lens. Even if the camera's turned away." He said he once saw her walk past the main lobby camera at 3:33 a.m. No footsteps, no motion alert. But she was there. I asked him to pull the footage. He did, and we both watched it in silence as the screen showed the front desk in grayscale, empty, still. Then, without transition, she was there in the middle of the frame, closer than the lens should have allowed. Her face blurred, lips parted slightly, hands down at her sides, staring directly into the camera. It lasted 7 seconds. Then the screen glitched. When it returned, she was gone. He deleted the clip, said he didn't want that kind of thing saved. I thought about quitting that night, but I did. Instead, I started researching. I found an old newspaper clipping from 1959, a staff obituary column from Ridgway's archives. 5 nurses listed, 4 with photos. The 5th is just a black square, but the name matched the scribble from the back of the photo. K. Dunning. Presumed deceased after fire. Remains never found. A fire in the West Wing had killed several patients and a night nurse. The article said her body wasn't recovered. The same wing where the old records room had just reopened. Her photo, had been stored there for decades, and now it was out that night. I got paged to room 109. A patient was agitated, pressing the call bell repeatedly. He was trembling and trying to pull out his IVs. "She's in the mirror," he whispered, "the one who isn't real. She keeps smiling like she knows what I did." I looked into the mirror above the sink. It was empty. But for a moment, I could have sworn I saw a movement. Not a reflection, just a delay, like the glass had its own version of time. I calmed the patient, stayed until he slept, and then went to the main floor to find the charged nurse. Karen already checked on 109. She said. My heart dropped. "What?" She said he was fine. That was 20 minutes ago. I checked the logs. My name wasn't on them, but hers was. Karen D. I hadn't written it. I hadn't signed anything, but someone had. I quit that night. Again, no notice. I left my badge on the station counter and never looked back. Weeks later, a friend from Ridgway sent me a photo. It was a staff bulletin board. A new group photo had been pinned up, color photo. Modern uniforms, 8 nurses. I counted their faces. There were only 7 names listed. The 8th nurse was standing at the back. Wide smile, unfocused eyes, and her name tag. It read simply, Karen.